Hey guys, well in this video, I want to do something a little bit different and I want to do a mini masterclass on how to close more SMMA deals than you've ever closed in your life. Now I'm doing this video because I've seen and spoken to quite a few people this week where I've reviewed their sales calls and I've realized that there is so much wrong advice out there, and maybe not so much wrong advice, but advice that is out of order in terms of like what is the most important priority of things that you need to focus on. So people are focusing so much on objection handling and trying to close the deal when actually the way to close more deals is completely counterintuitive. So what you've got to understand is that if you rely too heavily on emotional manipulation on a call, it's going to backfire. And so the first thing that I want to mention is that number one, you want to make sure that you believe in your product, and you need to make sure that what you're selling, you genuinely believe will help most people. It's not realistic to think your product will help everybody, because that's not how life works. There's going to be some people that fail with it. There's going to be that some people succeed with it. But ultimately, you need to make sure that most people succeed with the product. So that's the first principle in this masterclass, is you need to ensure that the product that you're selling, you believe in, that it works for most people. Now, the second thing is it's not so much about being a Chad closer or a king closer or a savage closer, all those ridiculous terms. What it really is about is building trust. So building trust on the call is the most important thing. So building trust and credibility. Now, there are actually two parts to trust. There's the elements that happen before the call, and then there's elements that happen on the call. And so it's really important that before the call, but what you want to try and do is make sure that you have at least a neutral effect before people get on the call. So that means you don't have negative reviews, you don't have a negative connotation about your brand as much as possible, because that is going to impact your calls a lot. And yes, like I mentioned, is that before the call, you want to have genuine elements and things that you can send them that help break down those objections. And so it's important that you have that piece in place before the call. Now, when you actually get on the call, you need to be able to build trust. And now if you think about it, how do you build trust on the call? The first thing to build trust on a call is to make sure that you come across as a credible person. So you don't hop on the call with messy hair. You don't hop on the call with random clothes lying around in the background. You don't hop on the call half asleep. You don't hop on the call drinking beer. You want to make sure that you hop on the call in a good state of mind, professionally dressed, and you look put together. Because if you look random and weird, people are going to think, why the hell would I invest 3K, 5K, 10K, 15K into this idiot? So frankly, you need to make sure that you present really well on the call physically, okay? Now, the second piece is you need to have good emotions when you're on the call. So if you're on the call and you're pissed off, and if you're on the call and you're just like annoyed and you're frustrated, what you want to do is just find something you can do before the call to release that little bit of tension. So it could be going for a walk, doing some push-ups, listening to some music, drinking some water, getting active, stuff like that. Avoid scrolling on social media, avoid junk food, avoid video games, avoid smoking as much as you can, because it down-regulates your emotions. What up-regulates your emotions is activity, water, sunlight, things that get your emotions lifted. Walking is like God's gift to this earth, right? After going for a walk, your whole perspective on life changes. So if you're somebody who has pretty like throttling, like you need to throttle your emotions a lot, you want to make sure that you do those physical things. Now, the next thing is you need to be generally positive and generally friendly. So it's really important that when you get on a call, you're like a good person to talk to. Hey, this guy's a good guy, right? That's the kind of person you want to be. You don't want to be, on a call and like negative, or on a call just like super monotone. Like I know that there's been sales trainings where people have done that, but I think it is important to, in general, be really upbeat, and not super upbeat, but just be positive on the call. Have a positive energy. It's really, really important. Then the next thing that you want to focus on is understanding the buying triggers that people go through. Okay. So when you're selling in SMMA, you need to have a few triggers in place to actually get the deal done. Now, one of the big triggers that you're going to get them there is the overarching promise of your service. Okay. So if you're buying from cold traffic, there needs to be a overarching promise that triggers people to buy. And so I want to tell a story to kind of explain this process. I was on a call with a couple of real estate agents I was doing marketing for like 4 years ago. And one of the things that really kind of made me realize what works with marketing is they were, kind of unhappy with the results at the time. And my promise at the time was, we'll get you 20 leads a month or a refund per lead. Okay, 20 leads a month or a refund per lead. Now, what I said to them was, hey, you know what? For the next month, what I can do instead is 10 appraisals per month, or a refund per appraisal that you don't get. And their immediate reaction to me was, oh, but what about the 20 leads? We want 20 leads. And that made me realize big numbers and big promises that can be achieved work. And why is that important? Because the fact is that 10 appraisals is much more is a much better result than 20 leads, because really it takes about 4 leads to get one appraisal when you're talking about that process. And so they didn't realize that for me to get them 10 appraisals, I would have had to get 40 leads. And so what that means is that you want to try and have a big promise that you can have that kind of hinges the whole, idea of working with you. Like the idea of working with you as an agency is there needs to be that promise that hinges things together, that connects things together. And so very simply, it could be we can get you an additional 5 to 10 bookings a week. We can get you an additional 30 bookings a month. Get XYZ result, because that creates certainty in that person. And now the next thing that people want to see is they want to see, have you done it before for people in my industry? So case studies and social proof is super important. Like, it's so important. It's actually much more efficient, instead of you trying to burn through a bunch of calls, to just do free trials for like 3 people in the industry, get some good results, and then sell in that industry. And the reason is because if they can see that you've worked with somebody in their industry, and even better in their market, and even better if that person looks like them. So if it's a young woman and you're selling to a young woman, and you've got good results for another young woman in the same market, in the same area, their believability is going to be extremely high. Okay. Now, if you have that case study, that's really, really key. That's going to build up so much more credibility for when they sell. Now, once you have the case studies in place and you have the big promise, then you need to explain the process to them very simply, so they can understand and connect the dots, how it works, but also how it's going to be easy and simple for them. So fast, easy, and simple is what people want. People don't want slow, complex, and hard. They want easy, fast, and simple. So you want to go through why this works. They also want to feel like you're using the cutting edge of what's out there. So we use bit of TikTok. We use a bit of this, bit of that. So having some kind of like flashy, shiny secret sauce does work because humans are basic, okay? If you get really, really good results using direct mail, don't tell them that it's direct mail because they're not going to believe you because they think direct mail doesn't work. So you want to lean on existing beliefs. Don't try and change people's existing beliefs because people are stubborn and it takes a long time for the people to change their mind, even though the proof is there. So if you sell direct mail, say, we do Facebook ads as well. We do this direct mail thing, and just don't tell them because, if they don't believe that direct mail works, then they're not going to do it. And I'll give you a really good story about this. So I used to be a personal trainer, and I had a client, and I said, you're going to have to count your calories if you want to lose the weight. And he's like, I don't believe in counting calories. I don't think it works. Now, I could spend all this time convincing him it works, or I could find a different way of explaining it. And I said, you know what? No worries. Don't count the calories. What I'll do instead is just give you a bit of guidelines of what to eat and what not to eat. And I called it a white list and a black list. So we blacklisted foods that he couldn't eat and whitelisted foods he could eat. And that simplified it for him. Still, in a way, it's calorie counting because I figured out what his calorie burns should be, like how much calorie he should have per day to be at a deficit, and turned that into a meal plan and gave it to him, right? He doesn't need to know it's calories. So that's really important when you're talking about the process and the mechanism. Don't go on and on about what you believe. Lean on their existing beliefs because you're not going to change their existing beliefs on the call. Do that after sale. Okay, so that's super important as well. And they're really the key components of the pitch. And then the next thing that's going to be even more compelling is speed of delivery. So if there's speed in the process and extra ease of use elements that you can add in there that they care about, then you're gonna start getting them to think. They're gonna go, this is actually pretty good. And then it really comes down to them actually pulling the trigger, right? But most agency owners don't have these pieces in place. They just don't. And so if you have these pieces in place, it'll be a lot easier. Now, what you need to do in your discovery, which is where you identify their problem, is what you want to do is get them to verbalize what their problems are. So if it's like, what's going on right now that prompted you to book a call? Oh, I'm not getting enough leads. Okay, when you say you're not getting enough leads, like, is that something that's been going on for a while, or has it been going on for, like just recently? Like, and when you say not enough leads, like, do you mean like qualified leads, or do you mean the sheer volume? And then what you want to do is say, well, how many leads would you like to be at? How many are you at now? And so why is it like that? And get them to verbalize their problems, okay? So it's really important that you do that because verbalizing their problem literally triggers cortisol because it's painful, because they're talking about their problem. And here's the thing. A big part of sales is triggering people out of disassociation from their pains so they actually take action. Now, and what I mean by disassociation is if someone has a problem and they disassociate, mentally what they're doing is they're going, I'm not looking at it, I'm just ignoring the problem. And it's a very similar concept to when you get somebody to step on scales and to really look at how much do you really weigh, okay? And the numbers don't lie. And so this is called chunking down, where you chunk down the actual numbers. Because here's a really funny thing. Someone can come on a call and present themselves as like an Elon Musk, and they can say, yeah, we're growing our company. Things are going crazy. We got this thing. We're doing this new product. We've got staff coming on board. And you go, wow, you think this guy's like crazy. And then you say, well, what's your revenue? And they're like, you're like, come on, mofo, what's your revenue? And they're like, it's like $2,000 this month. And you go, really? You just said all this stuff that made it sound like you're a multi-million-dollar company and you're doing $2,000. So make sure you get the facts about the business. It's super, super important. Okay, Now, when it comes to objection handling, one thing you've got to get really good at is just like not stressing about when you're going through the close, because a lot of people get really kind of stressed, and you kind of what it does, it really takes reps and volume of calls to get good at doing that last kind of phase of the call really well, where you're not kind of stressed, you're not nervous about it. But when you're going through objection handling, you want to be as neutral as possible, and you want to have pre-loaded or pre-prepared objection handles for any typical objection. And that's important. So if someone says, I need to think about it, you say, no stress, absolutely. When you say you need to think about it, what's kind of, coming up for you? And break it down. And then address the objection and then go back for the sale again. Then when they pop out with another objection, use the same kind of thing. Make sense? Just so I can clarify, when you say this, what's coming up for you with that? And really clarify, okay? I'm not going to go too heavy into objection handling, but it is important you have those pre-prepared objections. And so with all those things together, you'll be a lot better at selling and closing the deal.